What's up everybody, and welcome to a new video. And in this video we're gonna go over my notes for the Explorer in VS Code. And more specifically, we're gonna go over the workspace nodes. So what is a workspace? I simply define it as a folder plus some metadata. And what gets stored in this metadata we will see in a moment. Okay, so then let's get to the second point, which is how to open and close a workspace. So currently this VS Code tutorial is opened as a workspace. To close it, simply go to File and then here close folder. So this then closes the folder. And if you want to open it, then you can do it either by going to the File and then here using Open Folder, or you can also go to the Explorer and then here use this Open Folder button. So then simply select the folder that you want to open and then click Select Folder. So this is then how you can open a folder. And one side note that I want to mention here is that VS Code uses the terms folder and workspace synonymously. So as we've just seen here in this menu bar File, here the command is called close folder. So this VS Code tutorial here is referred to as a folder. However, there's also another command which says add folder to workspace. So for this command, this VS Code tutorial folder is actually referred to as a workspace. And later on, when we are talking about multi-root workspaces, then we will also see that here this command will actually be called close workspace and not close folder anymore. So that's just something that I want to mention, that VS Code uses these terms here synonymously. Okay, so this is how you can open and close a workspace. Okay, so the next note is that VS Code works primarily folder-based. And what I mean by that is that, for example, with the File Explorer in Windows, you have access to all the files and folders of your system. However, with the Explorer in VS Code, you only have access to the files and folders of the workspace. And this has the advantage that VS Code can save the state of the workspace within this metadata here. So that's what this metadata is used for. And what I mean by state is that VS Code saves, for example, what files you've opened of the project, what specific folding you have within those files, what editor layout you use, for example, or for example, what extensions you have disabled or enabled. And that, on the other hand, has the advantage that you then can easily switch between projects and immediately start where you left off. So for example, let's say we are done with this project here and we want to go to another one. Then let's simply open that. So open folder, and then here let's use this Python folder. If I open that, then you can see there are now here these two files open. So that's the state that I left the project in when I closed it the last time. So now again, let's say we are done with working on this project and we want to go back to the VS Code tutorial. Therefore, simply again open folder and then VS Code tutorial. And again, VS Code save the state of this project here in the metadata, and we can immediately start where we left off. Okay, so that's what I mean there by that VS Code works primarily folder based. However, here I also have a side note, namely the side note is that VS Code can also work file based, i.e. you don't have to open a folder or workspace. So to show you that, let's close this workspace. And now let's simply create a new file. So let's call this test.py and let's save it to the desktop. So now we have created a file, and then you could write your code. And VS Code also then saves the state of this instance here. So if I close VS Code and then open it again, then you can see that this test.py file is still opened. However, the state of this instance here is only temporarily saved. So if you open, for example, a workspace, then it's not saved anymore. So to show you that, let's open again our VS Code tutorial. So that's our VS Code tutorial, and now close it again. Then you can see that the test.py file is not shown anymore. So you would need to open it again. Okay, so that is already a side note. So let's open the folder again. So that's the side note there, how you can use VS Code also file-based. Okay, so then the next note is about accessing files and folders outside of the workspace. Namely, since VS Code works folder-based, one question you might ask is how you can access files and folders that are outside of the workspace. And there are two options. You can either directly open the respective file. So for example, with the File Explorer. So here's our test.py file. If I open that, then it opens in our workspace, even though it's not included in this folder here. Okay, so that's option one. Option two would be then to create a multi-root workspace. And to show you how that works, I have here prepared those two folders here, folder 1 and folder 2. So now let's open folder 1 as a workspace and then add folder 2 to that workspace. So therefore, let's create a new VS Code instance. And here let's open folder 1, desktop folder 1. And now to add folder 2 to that workspace, you need the command here in File and then add folder to workspace. So then select folder 2 and then add that. And now we have created a multi-root workspace with folder 1 and folder 2. So that's how we can create for a multi-root workspace. To close them, simply go to File and then here close workspace. And that's what I mentioned before. Now it says close workspace and not close folder anymore. So if you select that, then we get this message that the workspace needs to be saved. And that's because the state of a multi-root workspace is not automatically saved within the metadata. So we need to specifically create a file for that. So let's save that and let's call it multi-root and it's saved into folder 1. So let's save that and now it's closed. And now we obviously also need to command to open that multi-root workspace. So therefore go to File and then here open workspace from File. So then desktop, folder 1, and here's this file. So let's open it. And that's how you can then open this multi-root workspace. And another way of doing that is to simply, so let me close the workspace again. Another way of opening a multi-root workspace is to simply double-click this multi-root file. So this workspace file. So if I double-click that, then we can open here also the multi-root workspace. Okay, so those are the main commands that you need when working with multi-root workspaces. And here again, I also have some side notes. And the first one is moving the workspace file to a new location. So therefore, let's again open this multi-root workspace. And now let's say we wanted to move this multi-root workspace file to a new location. The way that you would do that is by using this command here, save workspace as. And the advantage of that is that it will automatically update these path attributes. So let's first see what happens if we don't use this command. So therefore, let's simply copy this multi-root workspace file and paste it to the desktop. So now here it's on the desktop. And now let's open this multi-root workspace. And here then, as you can see, those paths don't have been updated. And that's why now we see here that this first folder is called desktop, because the path is just wherever the workspace file is. And then here folder 2 it's not even working because there is no folder 2 based on this path here. So now what you would do is, or what you would need to do is to update those paths manually. So here, for example, if I then say folder 1, then we get our folder 1 here again. And for folder 2, we simply need to delete this here. And then we have our folder 2. So this is what you would need to do if you don't use that command. So let's close this workspace here and delete this file. And now let's see how you would actually, or a better way of doing that. So let's use this save workspace as command and then put it on the desktop and save it. And now, as you can see, those paths have been automatically updated. And here we have folder 1 and folder 2. Okay, so this is how you can move the workspace file to a new location. Okay, so then the other side note is about removing a folder from the workspace again. So therefore, let's again open our workspace here. And now let's say we wanted to remove folder 2. Therefore, simply right click that. And then here is the command remove folder from workspace. So this way then you have removed folder 2. Okay, so this is how you can move a folder again from the workspace. And with that, now we have covered all the points that I want to cover with respect to accessing files and folders outside of the workspace. Okay, so then the last note is about Workspace Trust. And this is a security feature which ensures safe browsing of unfamiliar code. And this is necessary because when using VS Code, some functionality, i.e. some code, is automatically run in the background. And this could be used to hide the execution of malicious code. So to illustrate that, what that could look like, I have prepared an example. So let's open another folder. Here in this downloads folder, this Workspace Trust folder. Now, when we open this, we get here this message: do you trust the authors of the files in this folder? So let's for now just trust them. And here now let's say this is a project that you've downloaded somewhere. So therefore let's open the README. And then here it says, in order to execute this program or this project, simply run the file program.py in a terminal. So before doing that, let's actually have a look at that file. So let's open it. And here I have prepared some helper code. So these are basically just some print statements so that it looks like that the program is doing something. So the first print statement says program initialized. Then we have here process I of 3 completed, and then processing done, the result is. And then here the actual code is doing this. So that it's opening this file here, file _g. Then it reads in this text or the text from the file into this content variable and then prints out the content. So let's have a look at this file g. So let's open this folder here. And this here seems somewhat strange. Why are there so many files, even though we are just using one file? But let's have a look at file G. So it simply says program executed successfully. So that's what should be printed out here at the end. But before we now execute this program, let's have a look at these other files here, because it's a little bit strange that there are so many files. So here file A also says program executed successfully, C as well, file I for example. Then. So they all seem to be the same. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be going on anything malicious here. So let's run this code now in the terminal. So let's open the terminal and then we're gonna run this file. So we're gonna say Python and then program.py. So let's run this. Program initialized, process 1 completed, 2 completed, 3 completed, and then processing done. The result is you have been hacked. So now what's going on here? Normally it should print out program executed successfully, but instead it printed out you have been hacked. So what's going on? To understand what's going on, let's turn off the trust for this workspace here again. So therefore, let me open the command palette, and then let's use this manage workspace trust command, which opens the trust manager, which we talk about in more detail in a moment. But here, let me just turn off the trust for this folder again. And then we can see what's going on. Namely, there are here now these weird characters, which are Unicode control characters. And what they do is everything in between those characters is rendered in the reverse order. So even though here it actually says g_elif, when this gets rendered, so if I turn on the trust, for example, again, or let's put it here, let's turn on the trust again, then you will see that this g_elif gets rendered in the reverse order. So then it says file_g. And the way that I've hidden those control characters is within these workspace settings here in this .vs code folder. So here are those two settings, and if I comment out the first one, then you will see then the control characters get actually shown. And then if I turn off this second setting here, then you see that here is there now also a yellow highlighting around those control characters, Unicode control characters. So that's how I have hidden this exploit. And then what I also did was here in this files folder, if you scroll down here, if you look at the end, there's another file_g. So this is also a little bit strange. But what I did here is simply if I rename this, and now let's copy the name of this file. And if I print that out, then you can see I've also used those Unicode control characters in the name of this file. So this file is actually called g_elif. So that's why it's listed here at the end. But because there are these control characters, it gets actually rendered as file_g. And that's also the reason why I put so many files in this folder, so that this malicious file here, or this malicious file, is somewhat hidden. Okay, so this is an example of how the execution of malicious code could be hidden. Okay, so now let's go back to our VS Code folder. So open desktop VS Code. And hopefully this example shows why VS Code asks you all the time if you trust the authors of a workspace, or if you want to open the workspace in so-called restricted mode. So to show you what that restricted mode looks like, let me just copy this folder here, and then let's open this folder in a new VS Code instance. So new window, and then open folder, downloads, and this copy. So now we get here this message again, if we trust the folder or not. And here the option is, no, I don't trust the authors. And then it says here, browse folder in restricted mode. So let's select this one here. So this is what the restricted mode looks like. And what it does is it prevents any automatic code execution. So this way then, if I open this folder here again, this way then you can inspect those files and folders in a safe way, and then later on decide if you either trust the folder or if you just want to copy the parts of the code that you need. And here, however, I have to make one important note, namely, the Workspace Trust can prevent a malicious extension from executing code if it simply ignores restricted mode. So therefore then, you should only install and run extensions that you actually trust. Okay, so that's the first note with respect to restricted mode. Then the second note is about the indicators that you are in restricted mode. So let's open the other workspace again. So the indicators that you are in restricted mode are on the one hand here this banner at the top, and then also here this badge in the status bar. So those are two indicators that you are in restricted mode. And then lastly, there's also a side note, which is that you can also edit code in restricted mode. So if I go to the other folder again, if I open program.py, here you can actually edit the code. Even though that doesn't really make sense because you can't actually run this code. But nevertheless, I wanted to mention that. And with that now we've covered all the nodes that I wanted to cover with respect to the restricted mode. However, in order to use the full functionality of VS Code, you need to trust the workspace. And you can manage trust with the so-called Workspace Trust editor. And you can open that in different ways. So to show you that, let me open this other workspace again, and let's make this a little bit bigger. So you can open the trust editor via this manage button here in the banner. So this is the trust editor. Or you can also open it via the badge here in the status bar. And the third option would be to open it via the command palette. So if I open that and then use the command manage workspace trust. And then here on the right side, it shows what functionality is disabled in restricted mode. So tasks are not allowed, debugging is disabled, and in this case there are 49 workspace settings not applied, and 17 extensions are disabled or have limited functionality. And then here on the left side, you can then decide to trust the workspace or to trust the parent. And here, just as a side note, when you trust a folder or a workspace, you can also don't trust it again. But that doesn't really make sense because potentially malicious code might have already been executed. Okay, so then here, lastly, at the bottom, all the already trusted workspaces are listed. So if I trust this again, then you can see it gets added. And then if you hover over an entry here, then you get this toolbar where you can change the path with the file picker, for example. So if I use that and then maybe say, okay, trust the downloads folder, then it gets adjusted, or you can also manually adjust the path. And then the last option that you have here is to delete the path, i.e. don't trust that path anymore. So those are the main functions that you have with the trust editor. And now to finish off this video, I want to talk about some workflow tips. And the first one is about not getting asked for trust all the time. Namely, if I open here the trust editor again, if a workspace is not listed here at the bottom of the trust editor, then you're going to get asked if you trust the folder, even if you've created it yourself. So for example, if I delete this path here, then it asks if I trust this VS Code tutorial folder, even though I've created it myself. So let's trust it. And now it's listed here at the bottom. And however, if I now open another folder, so let's go here to open folder. Let's open folder 1. Here then I again are asked if I trust the folder. So here again then I have to also trust this folder. And this can get somewhat annoying if you're getting asked for trust all the time. And one way to get around that is to open the settings and then search for Workspace Trust. And here is the setting with which you can disable Workspace Trust. However, this is not recommended. And a better way of doing that is to set up a parent folder. So for example, what I mean by that is if I delete those paths here you have the option to trust the parent. And because this folder 1 is on the desktop, if I press this button, then I'm trusting the desktop. And every project that I now put on the desktop automatically inherits the trust from this desktop. So this way I'm not going to get asked for trust all the time. So for example, if I go back to our VS Code folder, then here I'm not going to get asked to trust the folder. And then in this case then only open unfamiliar code from a path that you're not trusting. So for example, from the downloads folder. So if I open, for example, a folder from the downloads folder, Workspace Trust, the Workspace Trust folder, then here again I'm gonna get asked to trust the folder. So that's one workflow tip. So now let's go back to VS Code tutorial. Let's go to tutorial. So this is the first workflow tip for not getting asked for trust all the time. And then the other workflow tip is about making a decision about trust for large folders. Namely, oftentimes a folder with unfamiliar code contains hundreds of files, and in that case it's obviously not practical to inspect them all in restricted mode. So in those cases then the decision to trust the folder is not so much based on the folder itself, but more on the actual creators of the folder. So what's their reputation? Are they known or anonymous? Or do other people trust them? So that's the second workflow tip. And with that, now we have covered all the notes that I wanted to cover with respect to the workspace. So then now in the next video, we're gonna go over the notes how to actually use the Explorer of VS Code. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.